I appreciate that there's a community that wants to go down the rabbit hole of UFOs. Just because it's crazy doesn't mean it's not true.
A retired two-star Air Force general has vanished without a trace. A man who once worked at the center of some of the military's most secretive programs. And now, weeks later, investigators are revealing new details in a press conference, pushing back on key assumptions and addressing the theories that have taken over the internet. From national security to UFO speculation, what actually happened here and where is he? We are breaking down everything we just learned. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, real quick, I got to tell you about today's sponsor, Proof Wallets. These things are amazing, okay? I'm here to tell you, any hype that you heard about it, it is real. First of all, I love this. Proof Wallets, veteran-owned. It's a veteran-owned company that is built by craftsmen who take pride in what they make, and it shows. I mean, look how well they're designed. Also, they're super secure. Not only are they RFID blocking, but they also hold up to 25 cards without feeling bulky or like anything's going to slip out and get lost. The craftsmanship, that's obvious, but what really separates Proof is how they treat their customers. Did your wallet get damaged or stolen? They're going to replace it for free. You can even customize it with images, text, logos, anything you want. So go to go.carryproof.com/sidebar and order yours today. Use code SIDEBAR for 20% off your entire order today. That is code SIDEBAR for 20% off. Retired Air Force Major General 68-year-old William Neil McCasland vanishes from his Albuquerque home in the middle of the day. No phone, no glasses, no sign of a struggle, just gone. Now, if you've been following this case, you know that the internet has run wild with different theories, right? UFOs, government secrets, alien abductions, that he was kidnapped by a foreign actor. The whole thing makes sense given his career, which we will get into in a bit more. But yesterday was very significant because the sheriff's office finally sat down to address the status of the investigation, and they brought answers that we haven't heard before.
There's no indication, and we're not putting forward, that Mr. McCasland was disoriented, confused. Arguably, he would still be the most intelligent person in the room that any of us would be in.
Yeah, so that's Lieutenant Kyle Woods from the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office pushing back hard on the idea that McCasland wandered off, that he was confused, that he was disoriented. Kind of makes sense, right? Because if that were the case, wouldn't he have been found by now, especially if you have multiple agencies looking for him? But that is just one of several details that came out yesterday. Now, I will tell you, it turns out, before he disappeared, McCasland had told people that he was experiencing something that he called mental fog. And that is possibly why a silver alert was issued. Not because he had dementia, but out of what authorities are calling an abundance of caution. Now, we usually see a silver alert with missing elderly and vulnerable people. So this adds a new dimension, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more. But what about this? Some items that we thought were missing, apparently they were found at the family's second home in Pagosa Springs, Colorado. But some of the very key items, like his gun, his wallet, those are still gone. So we still don't know exactly what he was wearing when he vanished or what he had with him. And when a reporter flat out asked during this press conference about the UFO conspiracy theories, the sheriff's office was pretty direct.
Just because it's crazy doesn't mean it's not true, but we have to look into the realities. I appreciate that there's a community that wants to go down the rabbit hole of UFOs. I don't have a way with which to pursue that. We can only go off of fact at this point.
Now, by the way, we have more we're going to get into from this presser, a lot more, but I do want to say it's kind of interesting when you hear that response because I've talked about it before with guests on the subject. I mean, even if local law enforcement wanted to research his background and his work and his connections, how limited would they be? Would they have access to classified information? Would they get clearance? I know there's federal authorities a part of this, but I think that could be, that maybe is a complicating factor. We don't know, or it's not relevant to the investigation into his disappearance. I don't know. But here's the question. Where does that leave the search for McCasland? Because it's been weeks. There's been no confirmed sightings as far as we know, no direction of travel. You have this gray sweatshirt that was found a little over a mile from his house, and this photo released by the sheriff's office showing what they believed was then that McCasland was wearing when he was last seen. And now we have a little bit more information on that, as well as a lot more questions. But first, If you're just hearing this name for the very first time, you don't know more about it, let me talk to you about who McCasland is, why this case has captured so much attention. So William Neal McCasland, 68 years old, retired Major General from the United States Air Force. This is not some random person who wandered off. This is a guy who spent 34 years working on some of the most sensitive technology the U.S. military has. We're talking astronautical engineering, space acquisition. He worked with the National Reconnaissance Office. That's the spy satellite people. And eventually, he took command of the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Now, Wright-Patterson, that name matters because for decades, conspiracy theorists have claimed that is where the government secretly stored debris from the Roswell incident back in 1947. You know, when a rancher apparently found debris on his land that some have theorized was from a crashed UFO. The Air Force, by the way, has never confirmed that, obviously, but the association sticks. It's why when a general who used to run that lab goes missing, people start talking. So here's what we know about McCasland's last whereabouts, and a lot of this came straight from yesterday's press conference. According to the Bernalillo County Sheriff, on the morning of February 27th, around 10 a.m., a repairman shows up at McCasland's home on Quail Run Court. It was a scheduled appointment. He goes inside, he interacts with McCasland, and that interaction, by all accounts, is confirmed. About an hour later, at around 11:10 a.m., McCasland's wife leaves for a medical appointment. When she gets back, just after noon, so 12:04 p.m. to be exact, the house is empty. McCasland is gone. Now, at first glance, maybe you think he just stepped out for a walk. He's an avid outdoorsman, hiking, biking, skiing. This guy knows those foothills. But here's where it gets strange. McCasland left behind his phone, still sitting on the counter, his prescription glasses, his wearable devices, his watch, right? All of it just sitting there. And during the press conference, Woods addressed just how unusual that is.
His wearable devices and taking his phone were common practice with him. That is out of the norm. We said from the get-go that this was an abnormal behavior by his part, and thus we are looking at every possible aspect of it and willing to unturn any stone that we can in order to help identify where Mr. McCasland is.
So by that afternoon, his wife reports him missing, and immediately the sheriff's office issues that silver alert, which we mentioned. And that silver alert, by the way, has been a point of confusion. So you see the sheriff's office taking some time to clear it up.
With New Mexico state statute, a silver alert does not require a formal diagnosis of any mental deterioration. The reason being also is because Mr. McCasland is over 50 years of age. He did state that he was experiencing a mental fog. And because of this information that we received, we decided to do a silver alert. Mr. McCasland, it was confirmed, was looking in to some of his mental fog, but out of respect for the family, I will not go into any further detail on the state of any type of mental issues.
So yes, you see that reference to mental fog, but again, the sheriff's office is clear. This guy is highly intelligent, is not suffering from diminished capacity in the way that I think was maybe first assumed. But again, the key point, investigators say they have no indication that he was confused or disoriented on that day. But the search begins, and it is massive. We're talking drone operations, helicopter support, ground searches, search and rescue teams, canine units, cadaver dogs. They canvassed more than 700 homes in the neighborhood, going door to door, looking for home camera footage, security video, anything that might have caught a glimpse of McCasland leaving. And for more than a week, you have nothing, no confirmed sightings, no video, no direction of travel. But then you go to March 7th, about a week and a half into the search, and investigators find something. It's a little over a mile east of McCasland's house. They find this gray U.S. Air Force sweatshirt. They collect it, they process it. No blood detected in the initial testing. And here's the thing, the family, and it seems law enforcement, can't even confirm that it's McCasland's. During the presser, it was explained how the office and authorities handle evidence like that.
We've received a lot of tips about items that have been located. We check every one of them. We check with family and friends to see if those are items that were known to be utilized by him or owned by him, and we'll continue to do that. So that's the update on these items that you are seeing being brought forward. We're not saying he left in them. They are just unaccounted for.
Now, meanwhile, investigators start sorting out what's actually missing and what isn't. And this is where the press conference gave us a major update.
New information that came up here over the weekend. Items recently located is a light green long sleeve button-up outdoor shirt, hiking boots, but please remember, let's be practical. Mr. McCasland probably had more than one pair of hiking boots. Located at his Pagosa Springs house were these items. Items that are still unaccounted for are his wallet, a .38 caliber revolver, and a leather holster. I will have Lieutenant Kyle Woods go over some other details of belongings that Mr. McCasland possibly had, and any other further details in the investigation to answer some of your questions. And also, as you see in the picture, a red backpack.
Okay, so let's be clear about what that means. The green shirt that you saw in that photo, the one investigators believed he was wearing, they found it at the family's second home in Pagosa Springs, Colorado, same with a pair of hiking boots. So that seemingly means that McCasland didn't leave in that specific shirt, that he didn't leave in those specific boots unless he had another pair. So what exactly was he wearing? We don't know. What exactly was he carrying? We don't know. That is what complicates things. And the wallet, that's still missing. The .38 caliber revolver with the leather holster, that's still missing. And you see authorities address whether McCasland typically carried a gun on hikes.
We've followed up with questions of his wife. He wouldn't commonly hike with a weapon on him. That would be relegated for maybe overnight camping trips and things of that sort. And then it was for personal protection. So what are we looking for with that? Well, if, say, General McCasland had recently gone to a pawn shop and sold that off, and we just weren't aware of that, or his wife wasn't aware of that, we'd want to know that. And so that would be something that would be of interest. If someone is hiking in the mountains and finds a spent .38 special casing, that would be unique, that we would want to be able to take and process. So that's why we're putting that information out.
Which does raise the question, if he took his gun, why? I want to talk about now where they're searching, because they've been very strategic about it. It turns out that McCasland's wearable devices, right, the ones that he left behind, gave them a history of his favorite hiking spots. And one area kept coming up.
Mr. McCasland had wearable devices. He was an avid outdoorsman, and we were able to access those devices, see the history of where he commonly went. The Elena Gallegos area into the Domingo Baca Canyon was a commonly visited place. That, in conjunction with interviews with those who were outdoors with him, indicated that was a favored area to go, especially into the upper parts of the canyon. So we focused our search efforts there first, moving east from his residence, essentially due east from his neighborhood into that area. And between us and those who were volunteering with their search efforts, there has been a vast amount of area covered. We do have a map of that area. I don't have that present to show you, but it has been a significant search effort that's covered that entire canyon, except for maybe some very difficult to reach parts of the canyon wall that we wouldn't otherwise be getting onto.
By the way, that's really, really good police work. Very clever to look at where he had been in the past, looking at the devices. So they had been grid searching that canyon, drones, helicopters, canine units. And I will tell you, Mr. Woods was honest about what they found or they didn't find.
They have been out on both of our search and rescue operations. We've taken out cadaver dogs. They're up in the upper canyons. Actually, in the lower foothills, they came upon a deer carcass. And in the upper canyons, it would appear there may have been some form of a hint that of a smell that they picked up on, but with the winds as they come out of those canyons, there was no way to identify where specifically that was coming from. That wasn't consistent. That was one time. We've flown at night hours trying to utilize the FLIR to pick up on any heat signatures that may be coming off of the mountain. Unfortunately, we have one of the warmest springs we've had in years, and the imagery coming off of the FLIR, the mountain is just lit up like a candle, even at night.
So the dogs hit on something, but couldn't pinpoint it. The heat sensors were not as helpful as they wanted them to be because the rocks were too warm. And despite all that technology and manpower, they still have nothing concrete. And that is where the internet comes in, because when a retired Air Force general with ties to Wright-Patterson vanishes under strange circumstances and his name happens to show up in seemingly hacked emails discussing UFO disclosure with Blink-182's Tom DeLonge, people are going to talk. Trust me, they have. In fact, McCasland's own wife apparently watched all this speculation unfold in real time. She decided to address it directly early on. Right after he disappeared, she posted just a simple plea on Facebook, asking anyone who might have seen him to come forward. She wrote, "He appears to be on foot, so foothills, open space, national forest, wilderness seem high priority search." But then, about a week in, with no sign of him and the theory swirling, she posted again. And this time, she went point by point through the rumors. She said he doesn't have dementia. He was not confused or disoriented. She addressed the UFO stuff directly. She confirmed McCasland did have a brief association with Tom DeLonge after retirement as DeLonge became more interested in extraterrestrial life. His wife says he was an unpaid consultant on military and scientific matters, but she was very clear he does not have any special knowledge about Roswell or alien bodies stored at Wright-Patterson. And then she added a little sarcasm. She said, quote, "Though at this point, with absolutely no sign of him, maybe the best hypothesis is that aliens beamed him up to the mothership. However, no sightings of a mothership hovering above the Sandia Mountains have been reported." Now, I actually spoke about this with a prior guest, and I said, would she know what he was privy to as part of his job? Interesting thing to think about. Now, here's the thing that has kept the theories alive. It seems back in 2016, when WikiLeaks released a batch of hacked emails from John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's former campaign chairman, in those emails, there were multiple messages from Tom DeLonge. And in one, DeLonge tells Podesta he's been working with a retired general, a guy who used to run the lab at Wright-Patterson, a guy named William McCasland. So DeLonge writes, quote, "When Roswell crashed, they shipped it to the laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. General McCasland was in charge of that exact laboratory up to a couple years ago. He not only knows what I'm trying to achieve, he helped assemble my advisory team." So you've got McCasland's name, Wright-Patterson, Roswell, all in the same thing here. And that same general is now missing. And you can see why people haven't let this go. And earlier we talked about the sheriff's office pushing back on the UFO theories that have come up, as well as whether or not McCasland could have been abducted. Here's what they had to say.
How does a law enforcement agency investigate cases like this when there's that conspiracy theory groups that come up with these outlandish claims or rabbit holes?
Well, just because it's crazy doesn't mean it's not true, but we have to look into the realities. And so we look into what's brought to us, and then we have to pursue what facts we can find, as the sheriff indicated. I appreciate that there's a community that wants to go down the rabbit hole of UFOs. I don't have a way with which to pursue that. And so those theories have to be set aside unless we were to find something that indicated that. So we can only go off of fact at this point. Yes, ma'am.
Are you able to rule out at this point that he was either taken or some type of harm has befallen him for what he knows? And piggybacking on that, what could that mean in terms of information that could be extracted from him? And would that put anybody else at risk, or even the community at risk?
Yeah, I can't speculate about some of that in terms of who may or may not be at risk based on what information he knows. And so I'm not going to. To answer your first question, can we rule out whether or not he was taken or something nefarious having occurred? We can't definitively rule out much at this point with what we have, which is why we're investigating every possible lead that we can. We do have surveillance video that captures both ends of parts of that street. We are combing through that, as well as surveillance that we've received from the rest of the community. We are combing through that. We've done in-depth interviews, not just knock on a door, have you seen this individual, but very in-depth interviews with everyone in the immediate area, and we have absolutely nothing that would suggest anything nefarious has occurred or did occur in that time frame for what we were looking at. So to answer your question, we haven't ruled anything out, but we have nothing pointing us to it either.
Yeah, they can't rule anything out at this point, which makes it, again, so eerie. And by the way, they probably have more information that they don't want to release, so it wouldn't jeopardize the investigation. Maybe, again, if he was taken, the idea of tipping anybody off. Now, I will say, toward the end, a reporter asked a question that is unfortunately probably on a lot of people's minds. At what point does this stop becoming a search and rescue and it becomes a recovery mission?
Hope is always present that he's alive, right? And I think it'd be foolish to say otherwise. But it would also be unwise for us to not recognize that the alternate could be a possibility. And we're aware of that. And if we receive information that would lead this to become a recovery mission, we would pursue that with the same vigor we have this investigation thus far, and try to do that as best as possible. We are many weeks in, and if he were to have gone into the mountains, the likelihood of surviving this time frame would be very low at this point in time. So that's certainly a possibility and something we're considering.
So there it is, weeks in, no confirmed sightings, no direction of travel, not clear what he was wearing or carrying with him. You have a missing gun, investigators acknowledging that if he went into those mountains, chances of finding him changed dramatically. They're not giving up, though. They're not giving up. They're still following tips, 74 of them just through their online portals as of the press conference, plus more through the FBI, who's part of this search. They're still reviewing video. They're still knocking on doors. They're still asking for your help. And if you were in the Sandia foothills on February 27th or 28th, you were in this area, especially between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. on the 27th, check any footage you might have, doorbell cameras, dash cams, GoPros, even photos you took that day on your phone, videos you took, anything that might have caught a glimpse of McCasland. And you can upload video and photos directly through the QR code from the Sheriff's Office or by visiting the link on screen here. If you have a tip, call the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office Missing Persons Unit at 505-468-7070, or you can text anonymously through tip 411. You just text BCSO and your tip to 847-411. But look, McCasland's still out there. There's a family who is desperately trying to get him back. Anybody with information, come forward. Hopefully somebody knows something at this point. We're going to keep following this case. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for taking the time. As always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you next time, everybody.